Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the 1995 Score hockey set. And this was a set that they really needed to clean up the mess of 1994 because Score had a pretty clean and consistent design tradition heading into 1994. And then for whatever reason, they really went overboard with their 94 design and got it very clustered and very congested. And even with their parallels, they played a fun, interesting, but overly convoluted trick with their. What they did was they had a special release opportunity where collectors could send in for a special team set that was a platinum parallel. That was, again, a fun idea, but they were putting so much. They were overcomplicating the experience of collecting the card set in 1994. And so for 1995, they kind of needed to scale it back and simplify and refine their cards to come out and just do one thing very clear. And that's really what the 1995 card design did. It was a good correction with a very, very strong ultimate design. And you can see right from the outset that the design for 1995 is built around a very bright, clean white. I don't want to call it a background or a border. I want to call it a backdrop where everything else is kind of set in front of it. But the cleanliness of the white of that design is intended to allow the very heavily saturated colors to really just pop right out. And that's the beauty of this card. It's intended to stand out and be distinct by, for those teams that do have strong colors, allowing the colors to really read. And you can see that with some of these cards, the strength of the color really is a dominant feature on the card that helps it to really resonate. And it was a very effective idea that carried through for the whole set. Now, the design itself is kind of adventurous in that they used a torn paper effect that isn't necessarily a smart move, but the idea of it is to allow for more of that white backdrop to contrast with the bright colors. That was the theme of the card set. That said, this card set was designed, at this point, Score was all about doing parallels, and there were two parallels they were releasing with their card sets. Now, in 1994, they had a one per pack parallel called Gold Line. And those cards were, well, unfortunately, when you do a one per pack parallel, the cards aren't worth much because they come up at such a common rate. And so even by 1994, Topps was scaling back not their Topps Gold card, but the parallel that came afterwards. Score did the same thing in 1995, where their base parallel was one out of every, I believe it was 3 packs. And it was called Black Ice, and the card is where the player is still normal print, but the rest of the card is completely chromed. And it's chromed not with a pure black, which is what you would expect from Black Ice. Instead, it's a really, really, really dark gray, more of a pewter platinum type of a look on the card, which gives it just enough of a fascinating sheen to kind of catch your attention. I'm not going to speak to whether it's aesthetically pleasing or not, but it is an intriguing particular hue that whole chromed background has. But they were doing their one per box parallels as well, where, like with Pinnacle, they took their Black Ice card and they made a version of it where they have diagonal text that says Artist Proof. And this parallel is called, Artist Proof. So these cards were basically like a heightened version of the Black Ice cards. That's kind of the way to think of the Artist Proof cards in terms of the design. And all the cards in the set were done this way. Now, the card set itself, mostly veterans, they did have rookies in the card, which were very cleanly and simply designed. Each one of these cards has the bold text at the top that says rookie. That is really the only design feature on the card, and then it allows almost the rest of the card to be dedicated to a picture of the player, which means that these cards are very well crafted to just showcase the rookie. Nothing fancy like we'd seen in 1994. Here, this is as straightforward and clean and clear as possible, and it's frankly a very welcome addition. The way these cards come through, I think, is really strong, but that's me. But they did do a subset, which was called Stoppers. Obviously, this is a subset dedicated to goalies. And the design on this card is intriguing because they basically have a logo graffitied on a team logo graffitied onto a brick wall. Not sure that's the healthiest idea to put in the minds of kids, but it is definitely an interesting design theme on a card that you just don't see very often and really is a pretty strong and distinct element to these cards. And the card set does end with a couple of checklists that are done in a nice way because the entire card set is a scattered mess of cards. Players are all over the place. There's no order to how they're laid out. So with a checklist, you can either have a randomized checklist or you can have one where you simplify finding players, which is what this checklist set has done, where they have each team, the players from each team are segmented off, and then each one of the teams is gathered together division by division. So every checklist looks at a different division in the league. And something I really like is that they add in team logos next to each one of the teams, which is an excellent element to help make the cards look cool and make them more collectible as well. So that was a strong feature to this card set. But those were the main cards in the set. There were also a number of insert cards, and there are quite a few inserts with this single release set. The first one is Border Battle. Now, the Border Battle cards are kind of like the Black Ice, where the player is isolated and surrounded by an entirely chromed card. Well, there are two elements that are not chromed on the card. One of those is the text for the player. But the design theme has a big arrow on one side, and in the middle of it is a logo with the Border Battle logo, where the text wraps around a globe with a flag wrapped around it. And that globe is also not chromed. So when you move it to where the chroming of the surface kind of disappears, that stands out. And there are a number of different countries that are featured in this card set. And it's one of the things I really like about hockey in this time is they had such a strong tradition of European teams, and every year you got to see one or two card sets really showcase that. And so here you got to see whether it's US hockey players or Canadian hockey players or Swedish or Russian or Czech players, wherever they came from, they were all grouped together in sections of the set. So a nice little tribute to the international spirit of hockey. The next set is a holdover from 1994 called Check It. Now, the Check It cards for 1995 are a lot easier to come by than the 94 cards, which are quite difficult. Here, the card design has a really nice small amount of red foil down at the bottom, and then they have, well, the background is kind of blurred with a motion effect, almost like the players getting checked into the wall were causing a repercussive boom or motion or whatever it is. It adds a lot of energy and power to the card and makes it a pretty distinct card, which is a nice trait to this card, the card design in particular. Dream Team is certainly an improvement over 1994 because the 94 card was a hologram. 1995, they have, again, the players are cut out and then the rest of the card is chromed. But it is a nice design to the card. It doesn't have the richness that you would hope for a Dream Team card to have, but at least it's getting back on track and it does have a good look to it. But the last two inserts are very, very strong and distinct. And the first of those is Golden Blades. This is a card where the entire background is a gold holofoil prism. And it is so dominant on the card that you can't really see the actual background, which has text on the left side, and then there's kind of an echo of the player. For the most part, with this card, you see the cutout of the player, and you see that really cool gold prism holofoil effect covering the entire card. So it's a very strong, very distinct card, very unique, but the design is not a strong feature on this card. It's a little different though with the last insert set, which is Lamplighters, which uses a silver prism holofoil. And in this case, it's a different pattern that they use, but they also have an actual design to the card because they have a black and white, well, they have a black, kind of like a silhouette portrait of the player, and then they also have the cutout shot of the player. So those two elements are a lot more distinct. They don't have the finesse that the previous one has. This one's a lot more bold and blunt, but the silhouetting, because of the clean silver background, allows for the two images of the player to really pop right off of this card. But since we're on the subject of prismatic holofoil cards, there is one card that I need to add, because Score did a contest where they had an image that had some mistakes. And so collectors could send in the answer of what 4 of the mistakes on the image were in order to get a special prize. And the prize they got was a Ron Hextall card that has a prismatic holofoil pattern on it. Now the card looks like it is the normal card in the set. I mean, the back looks basically the same. The front, however, is a completely different design to the actual card of Ron. But something I do like is that this card is known by the number AD4, which is cool because you got add, which is where the contest comes from, and then 4 is the number of items that you have to pick. So if you see AD4 in reference to this card, understand this is not the 4th AD card. This is the only AD card. It's just AD4. The 4 stands for how many things you got to guess in order to win the contest. And that brings 1995 Score to a close. Now, in 1996, which I'll look at a later date, they got more adventurous with their release, and there's a lot more complexity to the main set. So like I said, we'll be looking at that, and then we'll be looking at 1997, probably in the same video. I'll see when I get to those videos, see how that shapes up. But at least for 1995, this is a full breakdown of everything that they did for this set. So thank you very much for following along. If you have any questions, please ask away down at the bottom. I don't think I made any mistakes, but if I did, if there is something that you feel is inaccurate, please let me know in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. And thank you very much for watching.